AI is, of course, on the rise, and now in the workplace and in universities and things. Another article came to mind. There was a student recently, I think it was in the news just the other day, that got in trouble for using AI. So there's, you know, for exam purposes and essays. So there's lots of different ways that it can be a good thing and a bad thing. But you're, of course, here to talk about the ways in which AI is a good thing within the workplace.
Absolutely. I mean, AI is here to stay, for sure. And we're seeing this rise of people using it in such a clever format. The other side of it is also we're seeing people who are using it, and during the process of that, they are losing their character. We're losing the actual insight into the individual behind that. And so we've kind of got this kind of mix. And I think AI is phenomenal when you're looking at it from a point of view of optimization, point of view of speed, getting results. But I think we have to remember that, you know, the fundamental of recruitment is people. And we cannot substitute the people, the personal aspect, by replacing that with AI.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines. The 9-year-old boy killed in the German Christmas market attack on Friday evening has been named as André Gleisner. In a tribute on social media, his mother, Desiree Gleisner, wrote, "Let my little teddy bear fly around the world again. André did nothing to anyone." The attack left 5 people dead and over 200 injured after a driver used an emergency vehicle lane to plough into the Christmas market in Magdeburg. German authorities are coming under fire after warnings about the suspect were reportedly received last year but deemed unspecific. Chancellor Olaf Scholz and ministers faced angry hecklers during a visit to the site as questions mount over security and how the attack could happen. Social media giant X, owned by Elon Musk, is also being scrutinised for failing to act on the suspect's threatening posts before the attack. Security has been ramped up across Germany and the rest of Europe, with armed police patrolling festive events and Christmas markets. In other news, Labour's Lucy Powell has admitted the economy is disappointing, likening the government's efforts to turning around a huge oil tanker. She says Labour inherited unprecedented challenges, including falling living standards and underfunded public services. It comes after the Office for National Statistics reported the economy shrank by 0.1% in September and October, with no growth expected this quarter. The Commons leader told GB News the government shares the public's frustration, but insists progress is being made.
People voted for change at the election because the country was, let's face it, going to the Swanee. We had the economy tanking, with living standards having fallen for the first time in a generation, and public services absolutely on their knees, with huge waiting lists in our NHS and elsewhere. So it's a bit like turning a really big oil tanker around. We've begun to start moving it in the right direction, but there are many fundamental challenges facing the country.
However, Shadow Housing Secretary Kevin Hollinrake claims the situation is far worse under Labour than the previous Conservative government.
The economy is tanking, as we know. Business confidence has gone through the floor. Family businesses are having to make difficult decisions in terms of their investment because of things like business property relief changes and same with family farms. So you're seeing this right across the economy why business confidence is dropping, and that's having a real-world impact on our economy.
Now, a 35-year-old woman has been charged with murder following the death of a 5-year-old boy in Essex. Lincoln Button died on the 15th of December following an incident in Winstar Drive in South Ockendon. Police were called to the scene following reports of serious concerns for the welfare of a child and a woman, and officers worked alongside paramedics in an attempt to save Lincoln. A woman was taken to hospital for treatment following the incident, where her condition improved. 35-year-old Claire Button of Winstar Drive has been charged with murder and will appear at Southane Magistrates Court on Monday. The BBC is under fire for refusing to air Freezing This Christmas, a parody of Sir Keir Starmer about the withdrawal of winter fuel payments, despite its chart-topping success. The track, raising over £47,000 for Age UK, has been labelled a victim of two-tier broadcasting, as critics point to past political songs like Stand Down Margaret that were aired without issue. Dean Ager, the singer behind the parody, plans to perform the song at Parliament Square in protest. The BBC insists its decisions reflect what our audience expect to hear, denying claims of bias. US actress Blake Lively has been supported by It Ends With Us author Colleen Hoover after accusing her co-star of sexual harassment. She accused Justin Baldoni of making sexual comments about the cast and crew, showing her explicit videos and images of women and discussing his previous alleged porn addiction. However, Baldoni has now hit back and claims that Lively has only filed the lawsuit to try to repair her reputation in the wake of negative press. But in a post on Instagram, the film's author wrote, "Blake Lively, you have been nothing but honest, kind, supportive and patient since the day we met." Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
A very good morning to you, happy Christmas, and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show. Today with me, Tom Harwood, filling in for Camilla. Now, Parliament might well be in recess now for Christmas, but that doesn't mean it's been a quiet week in Westminster. No, the Leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell, will join me to talk about Keir Starmer appointing Lord Mandelson as the UK's new ambassador to the US and the 30 bills she's putting before Parliament. Also, the Shadow Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, Kevin Hollinrake, will join me. I'll ask him to reflect on Kemi Badenoch's first few weeks in charge. Former Conservative Minister for Migration, Tom Pursglove, will join me too to reflect on the year in politics. And spokesman for Republicans Overseas UK, Jonathan Ewing, will reflect on a momentous year in US politics as we look forward and what we can look forward to in 2025. Plus, the pollster and founder of Electoral Calculus, Martin Baxter, will be here. We're taking a look at the polling around Reform UK. Is their rise real? And can the party continue that growth into the new year? Delighted to be joined by the former Labour advisor Matthew Larser, who's joining me, of course, to look through the Sunday morning papers. And let's have a look at this curious splash on The Observer, because it seems, though, that there's some suggestion that Labour want to block donations to Reform UK, but on the other hand, this is suggesting perhaps not.
Yeah, so, I mean, once we saw the, what I think will now go down as one of the political pictures of the year of Nick Candy and Nigel Farage standing next to Elon Musk, Shea Trump, there was lots of speculation that the rules would be changed to block the donation of the size of the rumoured size of 100 million quid. Now, it didn't seem actually, when I was looking at them in the week, it didn't seem they were all coming from the government. The Electoral Commission, which is the regulator of these things, seemed to be making soundings.
In and of itself is slightly strange that the impartial Electoral Commission, the regulator of elections, was giving interviews to the Guardian newspaper saying, I don't think we should allow Elon Musk to give money to Nigel Farage. I mean, it did seem a little bit curious of an impartial regulator. Absolutely, and I think that's actually what freaked the government, because then the reaction was, oh my gosh, this is Labour only change the rules because, they wouldn't be changing the rules if there was a big £100 million donation coming their way from a American billionaire, so the sceptics said. I actually thought in the week, I'm not sure the government has made its position clear. Well, the Observer front page, Michael Savage is the policy editor of the Observer, is often the conduit for stories from the heart of the Labour front bench.
And what he's saying is that the government is pushing back against the Electoral Commission and is sceptical about rushing to ban foreign donations. It would actually be by the way they would do it is by banning donations from foreign companies that operate here, because it has to come through a UK entity if the profits didn't match the donation.
And of course, Musk does employ many hundreds, perhaps thousands of people in the UK through his.
Absolutely. Although apparently Twitter X only made about 17 million quid last year, so it would the profits would dwarf the donation. Yeah. So, i.e., the profits
Tesla's a bit of a big.
Tesla, although he doesn't. It might be harder for him to make a donation from Tesla because the other shareholders may object. But it looks like Labour's not going to rush to do it in a hurry.
And the political calculation here, I mean, if we look at the United States, the last 3 elections, the largest spending party lost.
Absolutely.
Kamala Harris massively outspent Trump, and she lost. And I suppose the calculation here is that a government that is looking like it's trying to, squash down, push back an insurgent and change the rules latterly that actually the Labour Party itself benefited from in opposition. I think it got £4 million from the Cayman Islands.
Well, from a UK registered, operating company registered in the Cayman Islands, absolutely.
But I suppose the political calculation here is actually it would backfire trying to stop this donation.
Absolutely, and especially as one other story in The Observer is about a controversial set of donations to Labour in the West Midlands, which were hitherto anonymous because they came via a collective group where you don't have to declare it. If you give it to a group, the group then declares the donation rather than the individuals who've given to the first group. A bit complicated. It mirrors something the Tories do in the West Midlands, and that's got Labour into trouble. So donations are always a minefield. I think you're absolutely right. Seeming to change the rules immediately afterwards is never a good idea. I mean, Tom, we don't want to... a little bit one for political anoraks, but back in the 2019 election, do you remember when Joe Swinson was going to be Prime Minister?
Oh, yeah.
The Lib Dems, absolutely. And what happened is particularly David Sainsbury, who's now one of Labour's largest donors, Lord Sainsbury, he actually he left Labour, chucked a lot of money into the Lib Dem campaign, and the Lib Dems didn't know how to spend it. Because actually, in British politics, where you don't have TV advertising, it's actually quite hard. Once you've sort of got over a particular mark, it's quite hard to spend it. And I just remember getting leaflet after leaflet after leaflet. I keep finding them, at the back of cupboards, saying Joe Swinson's going to be the Lib Dems. And apparently they were so ill-targeted, the Lib Dems then did a review afterwards of what they did with all this unexpected wealth, as it were, which is sort of similar to what Nigel may be getting, and they found it made absolutely no difference. Candidates were themselves, people in key seats where the Liberals were targeting, were going to their front door and finding that they'd got leaflets they didn't even know about, and it was chaos. So sometimes money doesn't buy you advantage, and that's a warning to reform as well, that it won't be a magic bullet.
Really interesting point there. Shall we move on to Daily Mail?
Absolutely.
Where Dan Hodges, the columnist, has a very interesting piece out suggesting that there are already murmurings, disquiet amongst the Labour backbenchers.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I was a journalist in the time after the 97 election. I know I don't look old enough. And we used to do packages which we used to end, "There's trouble brewing on the Labour backbenches," was the catchphrase that was our internal joking. And there wasn't. And we were desperately trying to make the trouble by going to try and find backbenchers to criticise the government. And we had to try pretty hard to find them. Right. Looks like Dan Hodges had to try very hard this time around. So, I mean, just as Michael Savage in The Observer is the Sunday conduit for what the government want to get out there, Dan is often the conduit for the sort of what's really going on and the discontent within the parliamentary party of all the parties.
Suggesting that Sir Keir Starmer's position could be in trouble, that people are seriously talking about the Prime Minister who won the largest majority that anyone can remember, could be gone before the Parliament.
Absolutely. He's speculating is why Labour bigwigs are already wondering this will be Starmer's first and only Christmas in Downing Street. He's saying that in the May local elections, which, depending on local government reform, how many of them happen, that if they go badly for Labour, that will really stoke the pressure. And then once you get to the first anniversary of the election in July, Labour MPs will be thinking, oh my goodness me, how badly has it gone? What have we changed? And the clock, people will really start to feel the clock is ticking. The problem is, as you mentioned when you were talking to Anne and Martin earlier, it's much harder in the Labour Party. It's not impossible, but it's much harder in the Labour Party to get rid of a leader. It effectively has never been done. Certainly it hasn't been done since the end of the Second World War. We tend to let leaders stay and lose elections with the public rather than get knifed internally. I have to say, I think that Dan is was onto something here. I think that Keir is going to have to pull his socks up and pull up his performance in the new year if those rumblings are going to die down rather than increase.
Really is interesting, though. There had been attempts to get rid of party leaders. I mean, Gordon Brown faced a sort of abortive challenge.
Well, Tony Blair did, in fact, and they had to agree to go. Actually, that's the closest it got. Was
Yes.
people like Tom Watson, who then became deputy leader, and Chris Bryant said forced the pressure up, and then he set a date to go. People bottled it with Gordon.
He still did 3 elections, which is more.
Absolutely, you know.
But I suppose the interesting ones are Gordon Brown, when people thought that David Miliband might challenge him, he came back and didn't. Ed Miliband's, when there was all that rumbling about whether or not he would be kicked out. You were behind the scenes.
I was. I remember there was a by-election in Middleton in Greater Manchester, which we only just won against UKIP, as it then was. If that had gone, I think Alan Johnson would have been rushed in as a sort of emergency leader. But the thing is that at that moment, Alan Johnson, who's sort of everyone's favourite politician, everybody loves Alan, as the phrase used to go.
He's Mr. Pinsman.
Absolutely. I think the problem at the moment is there isn't an obvious Alan Johnson-esque figure. The 2 obvious candidates, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has not had the greatest 6 months. Questions about her elsewhere in the papers. And then Wes Streeting, who, although I think is still popular with the public, he's on the front of the Sunday Times saying that seeing people paying patients on trolleys in the NHS sickens him. The problem is that he's caused controversy in the party with his stance on assisted dying and 1 or 2 other things, which means that his star within Labour is maybe not as high as it was. But I suppose if he was to go, he would be the favourite at the moment, I think.
Really interesting stuff. Perhaps Keir Starmer safe for now because there's no one ready to replace him.
Hold on to your Keir Starmer Christmas cards is what I would say. Because it may be that it's a one-off. It's a bit like those mugs for the coronation that never happened after the abdications. But hold on to your Starmer Christmas card. Mine hasn't arrived yet. I've had my Tony Blair one.
Very, very good. We'll have to ask you to bring it in next time. But Matthew Larser, thank you for now very much for going through those morning papers. Well, still to come, I'll be looking at some polling on Reform UK and how they might fare next year. But first, we're going to have a little look at some European holiday destinations. Yes, are you in search of winter sun? Well, stick around for this.
Looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest With the Sun forecast. If you're travelling over the Christmas period, it's certainly going to remain unsettled for central parts of the Mediterranean. There's an area low pressure brings some strong winds, some heavy rain and also some snow to the higher levels. Something a little bit quieter for parts of Iberia, plenty of sunshine to be had here, but then down towards the Canaries, still the risk of some showers, although it will improve here as we approach Christmas Day itself. Temperatures in Madeira reaching around 20 degrees on Christmas Day.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And the latest series of Big Brother has just wrapped up. And as always, the housemates managed to cause a stir.
Yeah, that's an understatement. After 5 weeks of drama and twists and turns, 6 housemates were left to battle it out for a £90,000 prize.
Well, our next guest was there to the bitter end, coming third in this year's competition.
6 weeks you were in there.
Oh, I tell you what, it was a long time.
What goes through your mind? Is it, do you start to go a bit sort of, what do they call it, cabin fever?
Yeah.
Do you go a bit nutty?
like, at times, not that I've ever been in prison, but I kind of likened it to being in jail, particularly when we were having to eat the porridge with water, no sugar, or, you know, that was difficult. And the feeling that you just can't leave. I mean, you can, but... You know, it was, you
can,
tough.
but you won't get your hands on that prize money.
No, exactly.
You made it to the end.
Yeah.
And it's quite a big house, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you feel as though you can get away from housemates if they're annoying you a bit, or does it feel like your hot house with
no,
people you don't
can.
like very much?
If you're sort of, you know, if you're not comfortable with a certain conversation or something like that, you can always take yourself and move away. But can you have time to yourself? No. Not really. I mean, even you might think, do you know what, I'll just go and lock myself in the toilet for a few minutes. There's a camera and there's a mic in there, so you can't escape that. And then you're obviously wearing a mic, so there is that little feeling of, you know, I could just do with having 5 minutes to myself, but you can't really get it.
You've met up with one side of the house, but not the other side yet. But is that still on the cards, do you think?
I hope so, yeah, because I liked every single person in that house, despite a few whispers on the internet, you know, like, do you not like this? I liked everybody in the house, never had a bad word with anybody, so...
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're going to speak to the Shadow Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, Kevin Hollinrake. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. I suppose the first question is, you've kept Levelling Up in your title, but the Minister you shadow, Angela Rayner, has stripped the words Levelling Up from her department. Why do you think she did that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question I've asked her, actually, but she hasn't answered. I mean, I think levelling up was really important. You know, the UK is one of the, the regions are some of the least prosperous compared to our capital city, compared to anywhere else in Europe. So we've got a lot of work to do. That's why we're spending more on infrastructure. But critically, we need to get more private sector investment. That's what really levels up a country, and we're doing that with the free ports, for example, in Tees Valley, and we're seeing decent growth now in other parts of the country like Manchester. But you need the infrastructure investment, the public sector investment, but also you need the private sector investment. Get those businesses to invest. I think the way to do that is to keep taxes low and keep regulation and make sure we cut away regulation where we can. And what you're seeing with Labour, of course, typically is them increasing taxes through the jobs tax and putting a huge amount of new regulatory burdens on businesses through the Employment Rights Bill, which we're opposing where we can. So that's what you get from a socialist government. You'd get a much better government in terms of understanding what drives the economy forward and what levels up the country from a Conservative government.
The Deputy Prime Minister, who of course sits across from you at the dispatch box when you have your levelling or when you have your housing and communities questions, of course would say that there are massive liberalisations going on under this government. The planning reform that the Labour Party is putting forward in government is perhaps the largest and most significant red tape cutting exercise that the construction industry has ever faced. I mean, it's true, is it not, that building on brownfield land, particularly in our cities, with this new planning passport, is going to become a lot easier. That's a pro-business policy, surely.
Yeah, we're not against planning reform if it's successful. I think if you look at the detail, though, Tom, in terms of what they're doing in brownfield, and then this college grey belt, and then green belt. Actually, grey belt has become green belt. It's not just petrol stations and redundant warehouses that'll be built on. It'll be lots of green belt around the country. And also, they're switching the housing targets from cities. So you're seeing London with an 11% cut in housing targets, Coventry with a 55% cut, and you see many rural areas like Westmoreland, nearly 500% increase. Wyre, 100% increase. New Forest, 100% increase. So they really are gerrymandering where these houses are going. But at the same time, of course, the most important thing to me, and I'm not against building more houses, but we want to build more houses for people to purchase. We know young people, the two main priorities they have are getting a job and buying a house. And actually, Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are making it much more difficult to buy a house. increasing stamp duty for first-time buyers, getting rid of things like Help to Buy, making it much more difficult for people to have the right to buy a council home, getting rid of affordable homes to purchase. That's typical socialist government in my view. What you'd see from a Conservative government is the reverse of that, making it much easier for young people and older people to get on the housing ladder.
OK, Kevin, well, if that's all true, if the Labour Party has made it harder for people to get houses, they've raised taxes, they've increased the regulatory burden on businesses, they've increased borrowing, they've accepted donations for clothes and glasses and all the rest of it and concert tickets, why then is your party, the Conservative Party, the official opposition, still at the same polling numbers you were when you had your biggest electoral defeat in history?
Well, I saw those polling numbers and they don't seem to actually reflect it on the ground. If you see what's happened in terms of local elections, by-election results, since the election, Labour have lost 27 seats, we've gained 24. Reform have only gained 7, the Lib Dems have gained 1. So we are having good success on the ground. Clearly, this is early days. People haven't seen everything they need to see yet about Kemi Badenoch, who I think will be a fantastic leader. She's bold, she's optimistic, she's strong, she says what she thinks, and they want to see some red meat in terms of policies, be it on housing, be it on the economy, be it on public services, and crucially, be it on immigration.
Kevin, perhaps they want to see more red meat in terms of policy than in terms of sandwiches, because it does seem that this Conservative Party leader has been talking more about what lunch she has than what policies she might be putting forward to the public.
Well, it's interesting, actually. I thought she was being a bit humorous, I think, in terms of that, really. But I think if you look at, actually, why people are thinking of voting reform, and I would say if you do that, you'll get Keir Starmer again. But if they're thinking about reform, they're not voting for reform on the basis of their policies. They're voting for reform on the basis of Nigel Farage. It's a Nigel Farage party. Whether it'll stick around, I have no idea. But it just shows that what people really need to see is the best characteristics of our leader. And I think over time, people will see more and more of Kemi, and they'll see what I see, which is the right person to take this country forward. And the only way of getting this socialist government out of office is by voting Conservative. Anything else will just increase the likelihood of Keir Starmer getting back in, and this country just can't afford it. The economy is tanking, as we know. Business confidence has gone through the floor. Family businesses are having to make difficult decisions in terms of their investment because of things like business property relief changes, and same with family farms. So you're seeing this right across the economy why business confidence is dropping, and that's having a real-world impact on our economy. We were the fastest-growing economy in the G7 when we handed over to Labour.
Much of that pandemic catch-up growth.
Economies in the country. Say again, sorry?
Much of that pandemic catch-up growth. I'm sorry, Kevin, we actually have run to the end of the interview, but we must speak again, and thank you so much for joining us here on the Camilla Tominey programme. Really appreciate your time this morning. Well, that was Kevin Hollinrake, the Shadow Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. But do stick with us. Martin Baxter, the pollster, will be with us. Also, the Leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell. That's next.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. As we go through the Christmas period, we'll see much milder weather affecting the UK. A lot of cloud around at times, giving outbreaks of rain, mainly towards the northwest, elsewhere largely dry. At the moment, we've got a chilly north to northwesterly airstream affecting the UK, tightly packed isobars, with low pressure anchored there towards the northeast of the UK. And as we head for the evening and through the overnight period, we hold on to brisk winds, a gusty north to northwesterly airstream feeding further showers in from the northwest. The showers are a little bit wintry at times across the high ground in Scotland, with the best of the clear spells developing towards the south and east of the UK. And wherever you are, quite a chilly night. Temperatures down into mid to low single figures, perhaps locally dipping down to around freezing, giving a patchy frost in places, and the odd icy patch towards the northeast of the UK as well. As for Monday, well, we start the day with further wintry showers towards the northeast. The showers mainly wintry on the high ground in Scotland. Elsewhere across the country, some sunshine, with rain approaching the west coast there first thing on Monday. Outbreaks of rain also reaching much of Northern Ireland, but notice temperatures here a little bit milder than of late. And 1 or 2 showers across Wales, the far southwest of England, but elsewhere across the south and east of the UK, it's a fine, fairly chilly start. Fairly clear skies too, with plenty of sunshine developing as we go through the morning. And we hold on to lots of sunshine across those southern and eastern spots through the day on Monday, with cloudier skies, outbreaks of rain working their way in across many northern and western areas. A few heavy bursts of rain across Northern Ireland during the morning, pushing in across Irish Sea areas into the afternoon. And it's only quite breezy once again after those winds have eased during the first part of Monday. Quite chilly towards the south and east at 5 or 6 degrees, but starting to turn milder out towards the west and northwest. As we head into Christmas Eve and much milder days on the cards across the UK. A lot of cloud around, turning breezy at times. Some rain too, mainly towards the northwest, elsewhere mostly dry, some hill fog in places. But notice much milder temperatures than we've seen in recent days, temperatures into double figures. And we hold on to rather cloudy but very mild conditions going through the rest of the Christmas period, with temperatures up to around 12 or 13 degrees.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm delighted to be joined now by the leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell. Lucy, I've seen you've been talking to the Daily Mirror this morning. 30 bills before Parliament. 30 bills, but a pretty precipitous slide in the polls, going from around 44 before the election, now to the mid-20s. Some polls put you in 3rd place. What went wrong?
Well, look, we always knew it was going to be difficult, and it's proven to be the case. People voted for change at the election because the country was, let's face it, going to the Swanee. We had the economy tanking, with living standards having fallen for the first time in a generation, and public services absolutely on their knees, with huge waiting lists in our NHS and elsewhere. So it's a bit like turning a really big oil tanker around. We've begun to start moving it in the right direction, but there are many fundamental challenges facing the country that has meant we've had to take some difficult decisions so that we could get the money into the front line of the NHS and skills and education, and sort out our transport system, and really start putting working people at the front of the queue again. And that's been a really difficult job that we've had to do. And it's, you know, we didn't think it would be popular, but hopefully people will judge us in 4 years' time on whether they feel better off and whether their public services have improved.
I know a lot of people will accept it's a very difficult job for any government, particularly given the global and economic situation that we all face. But perhaps in the run-up to the election, things were said that have made your job a little bit harder today. I want to show you a tweet of yours from a few years ago about the WASPy women. You were celebrating Birmingham Town Hall being lit up in purple in support of the WASPy Women campaign, saying that these women deserve compensation. You're standing with a group of them there. You were a big supporter of the WASPy Women campaign. And then we learn that in government, you reneged on that pledge.
Well, we've not reneged on a pledge because it wasn't in our manifesto that we would offer recompense for the WASPy women. That very clearly wasn't in our manifesto this time around. But look, I understand why people are really disappointed. You know, these are women from a generation who were told one thing, and particularly in 2011, when George Osborne really accelerated that move to the pension age of 67, was really when the WASPy Women campaign came to light. But actually what this Ombudsman report was not looking at that decision. It was looking at whether the communications had been right in 2004. And we accept they could have been better, which is why the government has apologised. But what we couldn't accept was that the £10 billion price tag compensation for that particular small bit of it from 2004 was a proportionate or appropriate use of public money at this stage.
Sorry, Lucy Powell, you thought that it was appropriate
that report was only out
a couple of years ago. You thought it was appropriate when you posed with the WASPy women ahead of elections. You thought it was appropriate when you saw Birmingham Town Hall lit up in purple in support of the campaign for compensation. And your party leader, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, clearly thought it was appropriate when only a couple of years ago he stood with the WASPy women. Have a look at this picture here where Keir Starmer is pledging his support. This is in 2022, so after all of those dates that you mentioned, and he's pledging fast and fair compensation for the WASPy women. It's easy to see why people feel betrayed here.
Look, I can understand why people are upset and concerned, and certainly for my part, though, that picture of Keir Starmer there, is it not from 2018?
2022.
All right, it says on your clip 2018.
The page is confusingly called 2018, but below the date is 2022.
Right. OK, fine. Well, look, it was in our manifesto in 2019, so some 5 years ago now, but we lost that election, and we lost that election pretty badly, and that's because one of the reasons we lost that election was that people didn't think we could pay for all the commitments we've made in our manifesto. Come to 2024, there was no commitment in our manifesto to compensation for the WASPy women because we wanted to make sure we could afford all of the commitments that we were making, and we've made that judgment at that about that Ombudsman report that was only published last March. And as I say, the big decision that was taken that most of the WASPy women feel most aggrieved about was in 2011 when George Osborne really accelerated that to be faster.
Yes,
and that
I think everyone watching will be able to
report was talking about.
Make up their own minds as to whether people were given the impression in the election that this was something the Labour Party supported or otherwise, whether or not the specific terms were in the manifesto.
It wasn't a feature of this election.
But we do have much more to cover, Lucy Powell, because you're talking about many other bills that are being brought before Parliament, one of which is the education bill. And there have been some people fairly concerned that the education bill that you put before the Commons is rolling back a very, very successful programme started by Andrew Adonis under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and carried forward under the coalition government that has massively improved the life chances of children, particularly from the poorest backgrounds. Why is this government rolling that back?
Well, we've got a children and wellbeing bill that was introduced to Parliament just before Christmas that does a range of things, from introducing and making mandatory breakfast clubs, from tackling some of the excess prices that people have to pay for uniform costs, and also tackling some of these issues around homeschooling that we've seen so starkly recently in the Sarah Sharif case. But it's also about making sure that all schools, whether they're academy or local authority or voluntary aided or any other type of school, that all schools operate towards the same set of standards, whether that's the national curriculum, which, to be honest, the vast majority of schools teach to anyway, and that there are some underpinning standards that we expect across all schools. The academies will still have the freedom to innovate and the freedom to make decisions about their own schools in other ways, but we just want to make sure there are some standards across all schools, something that, frankly, the sector has been calling about for a long time.
It's also admissions, which would then fall back to local councils and the system that existed before. It's also the pay scales of teachers in these academies, all being set centrally. You're taking power away from academies that have been perhaps, well, if we're being generous, or I'm not sure if generous is the right word, but certainly independent analysts see it as one of the few success successes of the last 14 years, that really, in terms of literacy, in terms of maths, children are doing a lot better, particularly because of the independence that was given to these academies. And now you're returning many of these powers to local authorities. And say what you want about local authorities, perhaps they've got other things to worry about.
Well, actually, your evidence base there is not correct. When you look at schools across the whole, the performance in academy schools versus local authority or other types of schools, you have some very good schools across both sectors. You have some schools that have challenges across both sectors. The academy system now is many schools. It's nearly all, it's most secondary schools, and it's many other schools as well. So when it was first brought in, actually by the Labour government 20 years ago, it was for a tiny number of schools to try and give them the opportunity to make some changes. So the evidence base is not that academies are better schools or get better results. That's just not the case. And when it comes to admissions, I think what I know from parents that I speak to, and I'm a parent myself, I think the vast majority of people want there to be a fair and transparent process when it comes to admissions, that you can access a good local school nearby where you live. And I think that's really important, that we have a system, therefore, that is run and planned on a place basis and not a sort of free-for-all that we've seen in the past, which leaves some children with no school or a school that they haven't chosen to go to being allocated.
Just finally, Lucy Powell, of course, we've heard your government talk a lot about how the first budget is one that you don't want to repeat. It's fixing the foundations for more positive news in the years to come, in the remaining years of this Parliament. So can you make a promise for us now that there'll be no further tax rises in future budgets?
Well, it's not a budget that we don't want to repeat. It's a budget we had to do at the time. We had to raise taxes. Why did we have to do that? We had to do it, first of all, to sort of fix some of the foundations in the public finances, and there was this big black hole there that we had to plug, otherwise we would have run into all sorts of problems. But just as importantly, perhaps more importantly, we know we needed to get more money into the front line of our public services, particularly into our health service. And that's why we've seen the biggest settlement for the NHS in a generation to start to tackle these waiting times.
To press you on the question, no new taxes? Because
for us, the healthy economy and a healthy society absolutely is inextricably linked with a growing economy and an economy where everybody fairly shares from that. If you're waiting for a hip replacement operation, you can't work.
OK, but to press you, because we're short for time, can you make a commitment on taxes?
I'm not going to write all future budgets on your programme this morning, but we did have to raise significantly taxes this time in order to restore and to try and get our public services, our transport, our health, our skills, everything that's vital to a growing economy moving forward again. And that's why we had to take the decisions we did.
OK, but no guarantees going forward. Lucy Powell, Leader of the House of Commons, thank you so much for joining us here on the Camilla Tominey Show. Really appreciate your time, and a very Merry Christmas. Well, coming up, pollster Martin Baxter will join me here in the studio with exclusive numbers on the rise of Reform UK. That's next. This is the Camilla Tominey Show with me, Tom Harwood, only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's a time for the vegan community to get together, as well as an opportunity for non-vegans to try going plant-based.
Well, joining us now is some of her delicious hummus. We both love hummus. This is a great thing. This is the founder of Chickpea, Hannah McCollum. Hannah, lovely to meet you. And you've brought in some of your beautiful products in front of you here. So can you talk us through some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a range of chilled hummus, and then latest to the range of a new ambient snack pot, which is a fridgeless hummus that doesn't require refrigeration. But I started Chickpea because of my love for hummus, but also sustainability and reducing food waste and encouraging people to be more plant-based without saying go vegan.
Does normal, say, traditional hummus have anything that's not vegan appropriate in it?
Not really.
No,
I think
it's always chickpeas, olive oil, maybe some other bits.
Yeah, lemon juice, aquafaba or water to help with consistency, garlic, and rapeseed oil or olive oil.
And there's a bit of a misconception about veganism that I hear a lot where people say, look, I'm not a vegan, I love my steaks, I'll just get out of there now. But there's a misconception that you don't get the protein, you don't get the fats, and you're kind of just eating processed salads and, fake meat and things. But that's not quite the case, especially with chickpeas, right?
Yeah, I think protein is really important, and actually a lot of people think I need a certain amount of fish every week or meat, but actually a lot of the fish and meat that you're eating are eating higher protein foods, so algae, seaweed, pulses, all these types of plant-based foods. For me, veganism is like you could have a delicious rye seeded bread with just loads of roasted vegetables, seeds, tahini sauce on top.
That sounds
and there's nothing beige in there at all.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by a man who is a name that rings around the halls of Westminster whenever an MP is worried about their seats. Yes, Martin Baxter runs Electoral Calculus, which, of course, projects the outcome of elections, deals with all sorts of polling issues, because really we're seeing a very tempestuous picture when it comes to our polls right now. Three parties bumbling along in a very similar area.
That's right, Tom. So, yes, normally we have a two-party system. There's two main big parties in Britain. But at the moment, the Conservative and Labour are both on 26% on average on our poll of polls. But Reform are not far behind on 22%. So, as you say, three parties, all between 20 and 30% support. And that, of course, is a big change from the last general election, where Labour on 35%, 20% ahead of Reform on 15%. So Reform have gained a lot of votes in the last 6 months, mostly from Labour.
So this is the interesting picture of the last 6 months. Since the election, Labour has fallen down considerably, but the Tories haven't really risen. They've stayed...
Gained a point or two.
Gained a point or two. And Reform has gone up precipitously.
Reform has gained 7%, yes, which is added kind of an extra one support for every two existing ones.
You've brought along this graph, which might look a bit bamboozling to people watching. What is this showing? This is the light blue line is Reform vote share turning into seats.
Yes, so this is, yes, I think the last Sunday before Christmas needs a graph. So we've got, what the graph here is showing is the number of seats that Reform will win under our predictions against the vote share they get. So depending how many people support them, the more support they get, the more seats they get. But the interesting thing is that at the moment they're on 15% support and just 5 seats. If they can get up to 25% support in the polls, they get about 100 seats.
And some polls have them on 25%.
One poll, yes, but I'd say average poll is still 22, but 25 isn't far away.
So they could, I mean, if there were an election, you know, magically tomorrow, there's a world where Reform could win 100 seats.
Yeah, more likely 40 or so. But the really interesting thing for the year ahead is if they do a bit better than 25, if they can push through that, they might or they might not. But if they can get through, if they get up to 28%, it's only slightly more than that, then they're actually the largest party in the House of Commons.
Wow.
And Nigel Farage might be the Prime Minister with Conservative support.
So currently Reform is on 24%.
22%
22% on average.
But if they can get to 28, get another 6, then Nigel Farage could be Prime Minister. If they could get into the 30s and to the low 30s, then they would, Reform would have an absolute majority in the House of Commons.
And that is a fascinating distinction because obviously Reform getting, what was it, 13.5%, 14% at the election, 5 MPs. That first 13 or 14% is the toughest bit to get into Parliament. The next 13 or 14%, the gradient of the number of seats you get is much, much steeper.
Yes, under the first-past-the-post system, absolutely. Once you get into the sweet spot of the high 20s, you get many more seats for every extra percentage of support you can get. So Reform really are going to be trying as much as they can to climb that political hill and get more support in. And I think, obviously, from the point of view of the Conservatives, they will be trying to stop that because Reform's success is coming, although it hurts Labour, it's hurting the Conservatives particularly.
But this is completely fascinating, of course, because currently both Labour, the Conservatives and Reform are all in that, let's call it chaos territory, where all of these parties could, if they add just a few more points, win a majority, or lose just a few more points, come in third place. I mean, this is going to be, perhaps, if the polling trends continue, one of the most fascinating electoral periods in our history, where there is just complete unpredictability and chaos and a very difficult job for pollsters like yourself.
Well, it's very fluid and it's a bit of a cliche, but there's all to play for. The stakes are very high at the moment because there's a... Let's be honest, there's a potential political realignment, as there was 100 years ago, where the Labour Party, the upcoming Labour Party, displaced the then dominant Liberal Party. So that may well not happen again, but there is the chance that it might happen. And that hasn't been the case in British politics, maybe nearly since the SDP in the early 80s.
You sort of do have these 100-year cycles, don't you, with the... Well, the creation of the party system in the first place and the formation of the Conservative Party, 1834, and then 100 years later, so sort of the demise of the Liberals. Well, we're sort of 100 years on from that now, aren't we? If you're looking at these grand historical cycles.
Exactly. It's worth using history to remind us that things that are unlikely can still happen from time to time.
Really interesting. Well, you've brought along another graph for us because the popularity of various leaders is something that is spoken about so often in the media, but it's very rare that we put data to it. So that big red bar, tell me that's not Keir Starmer.
So this is, just to set the scene, this is an average of a poll of polls, because at Electoral Calculus we always like taking averages to get a better view of what the public is thinking, of how people answered the question of whether they had a positive or negative view of the four main party leaders. So Keir Starmer has gone has got a lot of negatives, let's put it that way. At the moment, if we're talking Christmas characters, he is the Grinch at the moment. And so over 50% of people with a negative view, just over 20% of people with a positive view. So his net, well, the pollsters like to take the difference between the positive and the negative and look at the difference, and his difference is very negative.
Martin, I must say my eyes are being drawn to the name third along from the bottom there, Nigel Farage. His popularity ratings look the highest of any of those four party leaders, on average touching 30%.
Yes, so he has got the most positive ratings of any of the major party leaders. But then again, he's also got the second most negative ratings. So more people have an opinion about Nigel Farage. Again, if given it's Christmas, some people think he's Prince Charming, but a lot of other people think he's the pantomime villain as well. So that many people have decided what they think about Nigel Farage. So it remains to be seen whether he can gain more support despite those oppositions.
But does he need to? In the first-past-the-post system, if 2/3 of people dislike him, but a third of people like him, and he gets that 33%, according to your first graph, if Reform were to get 33%, they'd be in government.
That's true, isn't it? He's not doomed yet. The wild card really at the moment is Camilla Badenoch, who you see on these figures has got modest numbers of both positive and negative people. So essentially, not so many people have a definite opinion of her yet. So that gives her, in a way, a chance, because if she can come into the new year and make those numbers better and define herself in a way that attracts support, it may be Reform Party support will drop away, and this will all be a kind of 12th night Christmas bubble for Reform. So, but that doesn't have to happen. The Conservatives had a bad election. They're on the floor politically. They don't really have policy platforms yet, and people still remember the last decade and a half of Conservative government.
It is fascinating, though, how few people have made up their minds about Kemi Badenoch. That does give her an opportunity to either soar high or sink low. Just finally, we've got to give a mention to the Lib Dems. What do people think of Ed Davey?
Well, on the figures, they don't think very much, but a positive and negative opinion is balanced, which is not so bad.
They don't think very much, but about as many like him as dislike it. That's the most Lib Dem thing I've ever heard.
But I guess the test for Ed Davey and Nigel Farage will be the county council elections that ought to be happening next May.
Yes.
Where there'll be over 2,000 seats up for election. Lib Dems traditionally, of course, do quite well in the counties and have won a lot of parliamentary seats for the Conservatives in shire areas. But Reform will be challenging to try and win some seats in local elections, which they've not been too great at before, but that will be a test. Never mind what the pollsters say, that will be a chance for the public to give their own opinion.
Well, it'll be absolutely fascinating. May the 1st is that first electoral test across England and Wales, at least. Martin Baxter, CEO of Electoral Calculus, happy Christmas, and thank you so much for talking us through all of your numbers and your graphs.
Thank you, Tom.
And thank you at home for watching the Camilla Tominey Show here.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Oh, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. As we go through the Christmas period, we'll see much milder weather affecting the UK. A lot of cloud around at times, giving outbreaks of rain, mainly towards the northwest, elsewhere largely dry. At the moment, we've got a chilly north to northwesterly airstream affecting the UK, tightly packed isobars, with low pressure anchored there towards the northeast of the UK. And as we head for the evening and through the overnight period, we hold on to brisk winds, a gusty north to northwesterly airstream feeding further showers in from the northwest. The showers are a little bit wintry at times across the high ground in Scotland, with the best of the clear spells developing towards the south and east of the UK. And wherever you are, quite a chilly night. Temperatures down into mid to low single figures, perhaps locally dipping down to around freezing, giving a patchy frost in places, and the odd icy patch towards the northeast of the UK as well. As for Monday, well, we start the day with further wintry showers towards the northeast. The showers mainly wintry on the high ground in Scotland. Elsewhere across the country, some sunshine, with rain approaching the west coast there first thing on Monday. Outbreaks of rain also reaching much of Northern Ireland, but notice temperatures here a little bit milder than of late. And one or two showers across Wales, the far southwest of England, but elsewhere across the south and east of the UK, it's a fine, fairly chilly start. Fairly clear skies too, with plenty of sunshine developing as we go through the morning. And we hold on to lots of sunshine across those southern and eastern spots through the day on Monday, with cloudier skies, outbreaks of rain working their way in across many northern and western areas. A few heavy bursts of rain across Northern Ireland during the morning, pushing in across Irish Sea areas into the afternoon. And turning quite breezy once again after those winds have eased during the first part of Monday. Quite chilly towards the south and east at 5 or 6 degrees, but starting to turn milder out towards the west and northwest. As we head into Christmas Eve, and much milder days on the cards across the UK. A lot of cloud around, turning breezy at times. Some rain too, mainly towards the northwest, elsewhere mostly dry, some hill fog in places. But notice much milder temperatures than we've seen in recent days, temperatures into double figures. And we hold on to rather cloudy but very mild conditions going through the rest of the Christmas period, with temperatures up to around 12 or 13 degrees.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.